America is home to 33 million small businesses, the beating heart of communities across the country.
And proof that the American dream is still alive.
This is a show about those dreamers and doers and the communities they serve.
Their real life stories.
Their struggles and successes.
Their grit, determination, and passion.
And the people who fight
to keep their American dream alive.
I'm Alfredo Ortiz.
I'm Elaine Parker.
And it's time for another episode of Main Street Matters,
America's small business megaphone. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone. I'm Elaine Parker, the president of the Job Creators Network Foundation.
And I'm Alfredo Ortiz, CEO of Job Creators Network.
You can subscribe to the show at salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcast from. So today we're joined by Congressman Roger Williams, who's the chairman of the House Small Business Committee. He represents the 25th Congressional District of Texas, which is located in northern Texas, and he's a huge advocate for small business owners in his district and around the country. He's also third generation family-owned dealership. He owns a Chrysler Dodge Jeep dealer, Alfredo. So we've got a lot to talk to him about today. Particularly in light of the production cut that Ford announced for their EV truck. It's called the Lightning, literally cut their production in half for next year. So pretty devastating blow to the EV plans for the administration.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to hear. I mean, also I know that I think a couple of weeks ago, 4,000 plus dealers sent a letter into the administration, saying consumers don't want this thing. So it'll be interesting to hear what he has to say about that.
Well, Alfredo, even if they want them, they can't afford them. They're just not in the price range of your average ordinary American. They truly are a luxury vehicle when you get up into $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 vehicles. That's not an average cost of a vehicle for a family of four.
Yeah, well, and it also has all the issues that this administration doesn't like talking about, but from, where the actual battery comes from, which, you have a lot of issues there, from, the mining that actually occurs and child labor and stuff like that it takes to actually mine it, to disposal of the batteries, to the wear and tear on the roads. You mentioned the price, of course, of the cars themselves. The infrastructure, this just doesn't exist. If you want to take a cross-country trip, forget it. You're out of luck really trying to do that. And I've heard a lot of horror stories from people that, particularly, females that are on the road at night and, they're running low on the charge and they have to go to the charging station. These are, in remote places and dark places. It's just not safe. It's, the issues are abundant, and this administration is just tone deaf to all of them.
Yeah, definitely getting out ahead of their skis, literally. Before we have Chairman join us, though, I want to talk about the jobs report that came out for last month. 199,000 jobs were created, and the unemployment rate fell to 3.7%. Talk to us about that, Alfredo. I know you've been out there talking about this jobs report because when you dig down and peel the onion, there's a lot more there to talk about.
Yeah, if you look at even the past 6 months, the biggest problem is that jobs supposedly created by this administration, which, we can talk about that in a minute as well in terms of created versus basically backfilled, what disappeared during COVID. But it's really only in three sectors, with healthcare being the big part of it. When you look at it, about 85% of the jobs created are in three sectors. So we don't have a broad, robust, bounce back of the job market. And so when you look at this particular report, you have out of the 199,000, you have 77,000 jobs that are in healthcare. You have about 30,000 of the jobs were really UAW returning strikers. That gets you to about 110,000. And then you get government jobs, which is about 40 plus thousand. So when you really look at jobs created in the real economy, those that actual job creators create, we're talking about 40,000 jobs. I mean, that is not a healthy economy.
Yeah, unfortunately, the administration comes out, kind of pounding its chest on not only the jobs report like this, even though what you just pointed out is clear that there are cracks in the labor market, and the job market is softening. But they also come out and talk about, the CPI came out and it shows that core inflation continues to increase,
Right.
for last month. And it means that real wages are simply stagnating. I mean, Americans are falling farther and farther behind because of inflation. And even though the rate of increase has slowed down, it's still increasing, and it's twice what the Fed prefers to have for inflation. And so overall, Americans have fallen behind because prices are so elevated right now.
Yeah, I mean, think about fuel, gasoline, 50% higher than when the administration took over. Food prices up 25%, 25% now. I mean, these are the elevated prices that the average American consumer and small business owner feels day in and day out. We got to remember that energy is basically an input to everything that we have in front of us, in some way, shape, or form, whether it directly to, manufacture something or transportation. I mean, energy is in everything. And when those energy prices are as high as they are, I mean, there's no doubt that inflation is as high. And, I'm kind of sick and tired of having, the left media talking about, look how great things are and look how inflation has slowed down to 3%, 3.1%. Isn't it great? Isn't Biden just the miracle worker? I mean, yeah, okay, the rate of increase, like you said, has slowed down, but we still have price levels that are almost at record highs in some cases. I think we're going to have the most expensive holiday season this Christmas that American consumers have found. And so, I'm worried about the overall health of the consumer. And again, even though the media loves reporting look how much they're spending, I keep saying, yes, they're spending more, but getting less goods and services. We have $1.1 trillion of credit card debt, right? So you have consumers that have record high credit card debt. Savings rates are actually at record lows. And so, basically this economy is all on credit at this point. And unfortunately, the Biden administration basically gave a drug to the American consumer through the COVID relief dollars that were thrown out there, that came out of the Inflation Reduction Act and all this other crap, quite frankly, that, they peddled to the American public. And now consumers can't get off of this drug. And so I'm really concerned about ultimately when, at the end of the day, that, like my mom always said, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Exactly. Which is why we put up that billboard in Times Square about the Grinch. Actually, I'll let you describe it because I think our viewers should go to jobcreatorsnetwork.com and take a look at what Biden looks like as the Grinch.
Well, it's in the Christmas spirit, we put up a little gift for the Biden administration, which just really reflects how he has attacked the domestic energy production in this country and really has led to, high inflation. So it's a little bit of a joke up there that we play out that basically says, how bad are Biden's policies? Well, they're so bad that you can't even put coal in people's stockings this year. So that's how bad his energy and economic policies are. So, but it's gotten a lot of positive reaction from folks. I haven't heard anything from the White House, surprisingly, but people seem to have liked it, and I think it was appropriate for the holiday season.
Absolutely, and it was a lot of fun.
I had fun.
But speaking of coal, we our small business poll, also the SBIQ, came out and showed it's the SBIQ at the lowest level since we started the poll over 2.5 years ago. And still inflation rises to the top as the top concern for small business owners.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, inflation has slowed down in terms of the rate of increase, but it's still positive, which means that it's still growing, right? Price levels are still going up. A 3% year-over-year inflation rate still means that prices are going up by 3%, right? So we went the elevated levels, we've slowed down the rate of growth, but it's still growing up, right? And so it'd be, for example, like, in 12 months, let's say that, I gained 50 pounds, and then, month over month, I was just, going a pound a month. It'd be like me celebrating that slower weight gain, but it's like the question still begs, aren't you still fat? I mean, you still gain weight, right? So why are you celebrating? I mean, that's kind of the same thing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to talking to Chairman Williams, who's going to be joining us momentarily.
Yeah, I am too. He's a wealth of knowledge, especially on the EV front as a car dealer himself.
And now it's time for our interview with Congressman Roger Williams, who's the chairman of the House Small Business Committee. Representative Williams is one of the few business owners in Congress and understands firsthand the effects of increased taxes, government regulation, and bureaucracy that hurt small businesses and economic growth. He has a special insight on the Biden administration's electric vehicle push as the owner of a family-run car dealership. Chairman Williams, welcome to Main Street Matters, America's small business megaphone.
It's good to be here, and Merry Christmas to all of you and your listeners.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Merry Christmas. So, Mr. Chairman, I saw today actually that Ford has announced that they're going to be cutting their EV production in half. The Biden administration's environmental regulations are going to require that 2/3 of cars sold in the U.S. be electric within a decade, and yet small business car dealers across the country are pushing back. And a few weeks ago, sent a letter to the administration asking the administration to tap the brakes. You've been in the car business for a long time. I've mentioned to you a couple of times that I worked for Chrysler. I've been in the car business as well, working for Chrysler at their headquarters in Detroit. So I certainly understand the business myself, but what are you seeing on your lot and consumer pushback on this issue? Because the dealers are crying foul.
No question. I mean, the EV vehicle scenario is the biggest ripoff since COVID in the American public. Candidly, it's not a market. There's nobody that comes in my dealership in Texas who wants to buy an EV vehicle. There's a lot of reasons why not, but the car business, as you all know, is supply and demand. You got to supply, but you also take the demand from the consumer. And the consumer is not asking for this. And this is the reason you see GM, Ford, and Chrysler backing off, because it's a loser for them. I mean, to even sell them, you have to pay the customer a rebate. You have to pay the dealer a rebate. They have to give rebates to even get people interested. And there's so many reasons why people just don't want them. I'm not against, as a business person and a car dealer, I'm not against electric vehicles. But what I am for is competition. And right now, the manufacturers and the government are trying to force this down the throats of consumers. They don't want it. I don't want to sell it. They're making dealerships like mine spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on charging stations, which are now being set up, and we don't even know how to operate them. So it's a disaster rollout. It's not a real market. And I'm glad to see Ford beginning to basically claw back their investment because it's a loser. And if you're a shareholder of one of the big three, you're wondering why you're doing it, because it's going to drive earnings down. And let's build cars that people want, and we'll order what they want. But let me tell you, this started back in 2015. Obama sold the big three a bunch of facts and figures that scared him to death. They said, well, we're going to commit to this and commit to 2035 being at a certain average. Never going to happen. The consumer's not going to let it happen. The car business is the greatest industry in the world, and it allows people to get what they want, choose what they want, buy what they want, and we make what they want. So I'm glad to see Ford pulling back. I think you'll see it from the rest. The dealers that wrote the letter to Biden, I think it was 4,000 dealers, just said, we're not going to sell this stuff. It's not a real market. So and I don't think we've heard back from the White House yet on that. So I can tell you, I'm the expert in the room. Not a real market. Supply and demand works. Let's build and order what the consumer wants, not what the government wants.
Absolutely. I saw an interview with a dealer in New Jersey who said they can't even get consumers to actually test drive the vehicles. And a lot of it goes back to just the affordability of it. I mean, even though the government is, paying out the rebates. If you buy one, you're still talking about an average of $70,000. And I know the Ford Lightning can cost you upwards of $100,000. That's just not in the realm of reality for your average American right now, particularly with this sticky inflation that doesn't seem to go away.
Well, you got inflation, you got high interest rates, and the price of these vehicles, the cost of goods sold is going up and up and up. So you're asking somebody to pay 8 or 9% on $100,000 on something that they don't want. I mean, it's not even real. But what we get coming out of the Biden administration is not real. And they just want to get people, frankly, off the roads. And remember, electric vehicles don't even pay a tax to drive on the roads, right. and so forth. And they're going to tear the roads up. They're heavier. They don't go as far. I mean, I live in Weatherford, Texas. And if you want to go to Midland, Texas and pull a jet ski, a horse trailer, and a motorboat, you're never going to make it. Just won't get there. So it's bad economics. It's bad business. It's typical government. And I'm glad, really, because I didn't think the manufacturers would stand up and begin to pull back, but they need to, because it's also going to break a lot of dealers, because they're going to force these cars down dealers' throat. They're going to play floor plan interest on them. They're going to sit there, and they're not going to sell. They're going to have to sell at a loss, and it could cost a lot of jobs.
Now, Mr. Chairman, we've heard a lot, about the obstacles that actually exist in even trying to roll out the EV industry. I know that, now he's a former chairman, but Mr. Toyota himself at Toyota Corporation was actually ousted because he spoke against the administration. But I think he was dead correct on this one, because he was saying, let's at least look at hybrids before we get to the point where we have 100%, 17, 18 million vehicles on the road all of a sudden convert over to electricity overnight, basically. But what obstacles, you mentioned a couple of them, but what other obstacles are out there that people should be really made aware of to just realize how impossible this stretch goal, as Biden calls it, is actually really not even a goal?
Well, the biggest obstacle would be how are you going to pay for it?
Right.
I mean, we got wages not keeping up with inflation. You got the cost of goods sold going out of sight. You got inflation, they're stopping nothing. And we're asking customers to pay for something they don't want. So there's all kinds of things. And there's no network to go out and refuel these vehicles, right? I don't think there's been one government station put up as of yet.
Right.
Okay. And first of all, they budgeted, I think, almost $1 trillion to roll out these electric charging stations. Okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, that's not the job of the government. That's the job of the private sector. You go back in the 1920s when they had Model Ts, two guys probably sat down drinking coffee and said, Joe bought him one of them cars. Now let's go buy that land, put a gas tank on it, and make him fill it up with us. Yeah. Well, that was the filling station.
Right.
The private sector ramped that out. This is not the government role. Let me tell you, I can tell you what a government charging station will look like after a week. First of all, you go up there, and it's going to have graffiti all over it. It's going to be broken, and it's never going to be fixed. That's what your government charging stations are going to look like.
You described
if we're going to do this, well, post office, Amtrak, you name it, right? And look, let's let the private sector build out the network. Let's not force EV vehicles down consumers or dealers' throat. Order an EV vehicle if you want it. Hybrids are good. I actually sell hybrids in Texas because it's an alternate for them. People get it. But it's not that hard. EV vehicles are fine. If you want one, I'll order it for you. Build out the charging station. Let the private sector do it. Make it a capitalistic movement rather than a big government movement. And things can work that way. But consumers need to know, too, that their insurance company doesn't want to insure these things, because if the battery goes bad, they're totaling the whole car out, for crying out loud.
Yeah, right.
So insurance rates are going to go up to cover that. They have to cover $60,000, $70,000. People again are going to pay more for their insurance. So it's a bad model, but it's a socialistic model. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
This agenda is a socialistic agenda. They want everybody to get off the streets. They want everybody to drive the same kind of thing. And 600 people are going to own the whole United States, and the rest of us are going to be minions and subjects.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it true? I've heard that the battery replacement essentially could be something where between $18,000 to $20,000 for a battery replacement. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, maybe more, but if they have to replace the battery, a lot of insurance companies are totaling the car out. Think of that. And as opposed, we think of a totaled car as one that's just in a heap, but they're actually totaling the cars out. They're building it into their insurance model. So a lot of people won't even be able to afford insurance.
Wow.
It just goes on and on and on. Let me tell you guys and gals, there's nothing good about this. Nothing good. We've talked here now for 4 or 5 minutes. We've been able to say nothing good about the EV program. And I'm telling you, again, the expert in the room, being a car dealer for 52 years, it's not going to sell. Don't force it down people's throat. If you want a big Wagoneer that is good, best for your family, then you get the Wagoneer. If you want an electric vehicle and you live in New York or you live in Washington or Philadelphia and it fits for you, then fine. But don't make us drive it and sell it in Texas.
Well, let's hope that the voters make sure that their voice is heard next November on this issue, because consumers are certainly making their voices heard right now to the dealers, and the manufacturers are hearing it. So hopefully the administration starts to listen somewhat. But all we've seen is an administration that has declared war on domestic energy from day one. It started with the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline and has simply gone on from there. And, let's kind of move to the broader economy on this question. But what are the broader implications and consequences of this war on domestic energy that the administration has perpetrated?
Well, it's done a lot of things. First of all, it seemed like this administration forgets what creates energy and what creates electricity, right? And look, I'm one of those. I come from Texas. I'm all for everything. I just want everybody to be on a simple, level playing field. Again, let the customer choose what they want. I got an electrical plant in my district, and gas and oil, and you name it. But let's let the consumer decide. Let's not pick winners and losers, and let the economy work. But you can't try to destroy an industry that's the basis of our country. And then what we do have, they go out and sell the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for invoice and go buy it back at list price. I mean, the whole thing is a disaster. Where they're treating this. The consumer needs to decide. And when you start talking, this administration is talking about, environmental issues and so forth. The oil and gas industry, the nuclear energy, you name it, this whole country has done a great job in bringing down and creating better emissions and better environmental issues for our air. Nobody wants to talk about China. Nobody wants to talk about India. We pay for everything. So again, the American people and small business in Main Street are getting hammered by this administration and all the regulations they're having to put on everybody, to where you have businesses now hiring, like if you're a bank, you're hiring more regulatory officers than you are loan officers. Again, it affects small business and the little guy.
Yeah, no, it really is. And, talking about, overall environmental regulations really is just one bucket of the overregulation coming out of this administration and really impacting on a negative front American small businesses. There's other numerous labor regulations that started with Obama. Now, the Biden administration has picked up, one of which is the National Labor Relations Board renewed joint employment standard. And I know you along with some of your House colleagues co-wrote a letter to the administration talking about the challenges of some of this with the National Labor Relations Board and the joint employer rule. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the challenges of this joint employer idea and the negative impact it will have on our franchise system and our small businesses?
Well, the franchise system is one of the greatest things we have in our country. I'm a franchisee. I'm a Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram dealer. It's been in my family for 3 generations. It's employed a lot of people. And the franchise system works pretty good, and it allows for competition. Among individual businesses and consumers and so forth. So the idea of going after the franchise system and putting you in basically to where you're up against fighting either the manufacturer, the supplier, or you're fighting the federal government is not a good model, because you can't ever beat the federal government. They can sell, they can make more, they can sell for less, they can pay more, and the Main Street American, the franchisee, cannot do that. So why they even want to jack with it and mess with it is beyond me, because again, it just makes people smaller, not bigger. And as a franchisee for over 50 years, like I said, my family for over 80 years, you need to just get out of our life and let competition work, competition drive it. And franchise system also allows for people to invest a small amount in a business and become a big business. You can go on and on with some of the great companies in our country are franchisees.
Yeah, it seems as though one of the big reasons they're really trying to do this is to try to help make it easy to unionize, because obviously as you pass this joint employer idea, you can basically go and create basically one big union at some of these companies. And so it seems like it's just kind of a hidden and veiled attempt at increasing the union roles, right?
Well, exactly, and putting people on organized labor. Look, at small business and franchisees can't pay that. I mean, come on. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, they even want to franchise college athlete. I mean, they even want to unionize college athletes. I mean, it's just a last gasp effort for socialism to try to beat out entrepreneurship, risk and reward, and in this country. So, and they're on their last leg. But it's a fight we shouldn't be in. Look, let's create a business. Let's have risk capital people create a business, hire people, put them to work, have to give service, let a consumer decide if they're doing good or bad, and see who survives. And let the government do three things: collect our taxes, defend our borders, and help us with infrastructure, and get out of the life of the small business owner. Because at the end of the day, who's going to judge the small business owner should not be the federal government and their
Right.
success. It should be the consumer.
Yep.
Do you give good service? Do you give bad service? You know, in the car industry, we say that a good price will sell the first car, but its service sells the second, third, fourth, and fifth,
So
and right
true.
on down the line. And that's true with wherever you go. We need to let that work. The consumer will benefit, entrepreneurship will be strong, and you'll have more businesses and will start and be in business much longer if you allow that to happen.
Amen, Mr. Chairman. Well, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Main Street Matters today, America's small business megaphone. And thank you all for taking the time to listen. Main Street Matters is part of the Salem Podcast Network. New episodes debut every Wednesday and Friday. Please subscribe to salempodcastnetwork.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll be back soon for another episode. Thank you.